Don in London, hello. My video is all about recovery from addiction to either substance or behaviour, and as part of that I share as best I can about recovery, and part of recovery for me is being a fellow in the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't speak for AA, never can, never will, but I share about how AA has helped me, and one of the things I do is do videos on some of the literature and share about the 12 steps and 12 traditions which are in this book, a very handy big version. There are smaller versions to carry around if you need something to read on a train, a boat, a plane, or simply sitting on a park bench because you've got nowhere else to go, which is where I ended up in the end. So I will share start my videos with the AA preamble, what AA is there to do, and maybe add a couple of things in as well for good measure. AA is what you make of it in your life if you need or have a desire to stop drinking, and that's all it is. That's the only requirement. So without further ado, as this is just a simple reading of step 3 with 1 or 2 added bits for me, and anything I add I try and make sure you know it's my addition, so that I'm not trying to persuade you away from your own views, values, beliefs about life and how it needs to be led by you. So fellowship is really simply a desire to be sober and how to go about it, and what has worked for other people who share about it where they feel it is appropriate. I don't represent AA, never can, never will. AA is about unique, authentic people with one similarity: sobriety and sharing about it. So the AA preamble, this is what AA says at every meeting about AA, and it reflects the views of all the people in the room, as long as they remember that this is what AA is there to do. It's not for me to give you my opinion about how you should lead your life, quite the reverse. It's about learning our own path in life. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. So that's it. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. And this is my side. There are no rules, laws or regulations in AA, because if there were, nobody would go. We are stubborn, defiant people, and we don't like rules, regulations and laws, and indeed the very idea that there is or are any which apply to us, pretty much in the addiction of alcohol or in the recovery from addiction to alcohol, rules, regulations and laws will not help us, but a genuine desire to see how to stop, or to stop drinking, is where we start. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. So AA never keeps more than a prudent reserve, just in case the issue of money should become an issue in itself. So we only have a prudent amount of money. We make contributions if we can, and if we can't, it's okay. I made contributions to the funds of my meetings when I really couldn't afford it, because I didn't want to be seen to be so low down. The actual answer is it made me hungry, so I ate all the biscuits which were available. Swings and roundabouts. So better not to put money in if you don't have it to give. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. And that's true. The fellowship is there for one thing: for people who have a desire to stop drinking and share a message, and there's a primary purpose which follows. But everybody in AA is allied with something or other, or has beliefs and attitudes and outlooks which are unique to them, and you will hear about them over and over again in AA. But the most important thing to remember is no one is there to impose their views or opinions on you, but just to share their experience, strength and hope of how sobriety is working for them. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety, and this is why I do these videos Often in early recovery, people can't read and make sense of anything. I couldn't. And sometimes people can't read and write, which is true. And some people just don't feel they have time to pick up a book because there's more important things to do. And often there are. It's called getting on with life. But actually the books do help me make sense of why the fellowship is the way it is and how it works, how sobriety works for a person, just one person, and why the fellowship is about unity, service and recovery. And we are all trusted servants and there are no leaders. All these things are important to me because it means I feel comfortable just being part of a group of people who feel and have a desire to stop drinking and stay stopped. So step 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. And so this word God, what I've learned is in life we can be atheist, not believe, agnostic, not sure, and believer in God. And the good news is the God that you understand is the God that you understand. It may be quite different from how other people view and understand God, depending on their religion or no religion, or whether you're an atheist, agnostic or believer, in a particular way which suits you and fits with your life experiences and your life as it is today. For me, what's most important is knowing that there is a power, or many powers, greater than me in this life, where I can find truth, love and wisdom. The truth of now, how to love and be loved back, and the wisdom which always seems to come through the many voices inside and outside fellowship these days. So whatever your higher power is, as long as you're not God and you're not the higher power, it means that you're probably, with the rest of us, learning life on a daily basis. So the word God does not frighten me, and I know without a shadow of a doubt that sometimes I felt I didn't believe, I did believe, and sometimes I just don't know. But I know one thing, I don't know what is right for you, and only you may determine that as you move along in sobriety. And of course our understanding of what God may be in our lives, or no God, or whatever we believe in, will keep on changing through time. So we don't get stuck in our own conviction if that conviction doesn't hold to be true in our lives. But it's the personal issue of God. It remains a personal issue. It's not something that can be prescribed or forced upon you. So if you have a higher power in your life, and for me it's truth, love and wisdom, as Gandhi said, God is truth, God is love, God is wisdom, or words to that effect, and I quite like that as a definition. It's the truth of now, how to love, be loved, useful, and wisdom, which I learn from others. So it's the humility to keep on learning, I guess, which is most important for me, from a power greater than me, life itself. So I have faith in my life, faith that life is the way it will be, faith that I can continue until I expire, and what's important is being in the moment of now, my spiritual connection to living. So this is me, and this is the step 3 reading. Practicing step 3 is like opening up a door which to all appearances is still closed and locked. All we need is a key and the decision to swing the door open. There is only one key, and it's called willingness, and as part of the 12-step program, the 12 steps are about open, honest and willing to keep on learning life. So willingness is key for me. Once unlocked by willingness, the door opens almost of itself, and looking through it we shall see a pathway beside which is an inscription. It reads, "This is the way to a faith that works." In the first 2 steps we were engaged in reflection. We saw that we were powerless over alcohol, but we also perceived that faith of some kind, if only in AA itself, is possible to anyone. These conclusions did not require action, they required only acceptance. So the admission and acceptance of being powerless over alcohol and life would go unmanageable again if we did drink, through to came to believe that a higher power could restore us to sanity, is about acceptance and having a little faith in the wisdom that is surrounding us. And sometimes people say God works through people. Like all the remaining steps, step 3 calls for affirmative action, for it is only by action that we can cut away the self-will which has always blocked the entry of God, or as I say, the wisdom of others, learning the truth and what is love, or if you like, a higher power into our lives. Faith, to be sure, is necessary, but faith alone can avail nothing. We can have faith yet keep God out of our lives. Therefore our problem now becomes just how and by what specific means shall we be able to let him in. So an understanding of a higher power feels right. There are many higher powers which may be called God. Step 3 represents our first attempt to do this. In fact, the effectiveness of the whole AA program will rest upon how well and earnestly we have tried to come to a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. And this is a personal understanding of God or a higher power. It's no good trying to adopt another person's higher power or another person's perception of God. It's what is going to work in your life which is important, not my life. So some people have faith and belief in God. Some people have faith and belief in a power greater than them. Some people have faith and are listening for the wisdom of the universe, which normally comes through others. And each and every one will work. If you let the light in, let the living wisdom in from others to adopt and see if it will work for you. But it won't work exactly the same as any other person. That's the real good news. You don't have to conform to somebody else's ideas or opinions. Indeed, it won't work if you do, because you will blame them when it goes wrong. And it can go wrong, simply because we're human, and it's through our mistakes we keep learning. Continuing, to every worldly and practical-minded beginner, this step looks hard, even impossible. No matter how much one wishes to try, exactly how can he turn his will and his own life over to the care of whatever God he thinks there is? Fortunately, for we who have tried it, and with equal misgivings, can testify that anyone at all can begin to do it. And I can testify to that too. We can further add that a beginning, even the smallest, is all that is needed. Once we have placed the key of willingness in the lock, and have the door ever so slightly open, we find that we can always open it wider. Though self-will may slam it shut again, as it frequently does, it will always respond the moment we again pick up the key of willingness. So in other words, my self-will can run riot. I believe I'm right, so therefore I'm shutting the door to listening to what's going on in the world. Or maybe I just don't like the way the world is, so I slam the door on listening to what other people are doing to keep sober and that life is still working. Maybe this all sounds mysterious and remote, something like Einstein's theory of relativity, or a proposition in nuclear physics. And interestingly enough, Einstein's theory of relativity is under challenge at the moment, because they found something which may go faster than the speed of light. That's neutrinos. So not everything stays the same, even in science. Indeed, science is moving along very speedily at the moment. It isn't at all. Let's look at how practical it actually is. Every man and woman who has joined AA and intends to stick has, without realizing it, made a beginning on step 3. Let go, let good things happen. Isn't it true that in all matters touching upon alcohol, each of them has decided to turn his or her life over to the care, protection and guidance of Alcoholics Anonymous? And when I say care and protection, guidance of Alcoholics Anonymous, it's what you see as similar and useful to you. And you will hear a lot of things which are not similar and not useful to you as well. So we still have to sift through what is appropriate and will work, and to be challenging of ourselves and others, but in a very equal way. Already a willingness has been achieved to cast out one's own will and one's own ideas about the alcohol problem in favour of those suggested by AA. Any willing newcomer feels sure AA is the only safe harbour for the foundering vessel he has become. Now, if this is not turning one's will and life over to a newfound providence, then what is it? And I actually like that, a newfound providence, which is the wisdom of other people, and being able to hear it after a while, once my rattling and shaking and inability to do anything had settled down into a little bit more patience with myself and listening to what other people were doing to keep sober. But suppose that instinct still cries out, as it certainly will, yes, respecting alcohol, I guess I have to be dependent upon AA, but in all other matters I must still maintain my independence. Nothing is going to turn me into a non-entity, and it doesn't. If I keep on turning my life and my will over to the care of something or somebody else, what will become of me? I'll look like the hole in a donut. This, of course, is the process by which instinct and logic always seek to bolster egotism, and so frustrate spiritual development. And an aside here, for me spiritual development is living in the moment of now, and keep on learning what is happening in the moment of now, and learning from what is going on in the moment of now. So my spiritual development is pretty much in place, because I don't know the answers until I get to the question. The trouble is that this kind of thinking takes no real account of the facts, and the facts seem to be these. The more we become willing to depend upon a higher power, truth, love and wisdom in my case, the more independent we actually are. Therefore, dependence, as AA practices it, is really a means of gaining true independence of the spirit, and true independence of the spirit is seeing reality, life on life's terms, and how to cope with it. No matter what you believe in, that's pretty much where it takes us. Let's examine for a moment this idea of dependence at the level of everyday living. In this area, it is startling to discover how dependent we really are, and how unconscious of that dependence. Every modern house has electric wiring carrying power and light to its interior. We are delighted with this dependence. Our main hope is that nothing will ever cut off the supply of the current. By so accepting our dependence upon this marvel of science, we find ourselves more independent personally. Not only are we more independent, we are even more comfortable and secure. Power flows just where it is needed. Silently and surely, electricity, that strange energy so few people understand, meets our simplest daily needs, and our most desperate ones too. Ask the polio sufferer confined to an iron lung, who depends with complete trust upon a motor to keep the breath of life in him. But the moment our mental or emotional independence is in question, how differently we behave. How persistently we claim the right to decide all by ourselves just what we shall think and just how we shall act. Of course we'll weigh the pros and cons of every problem. We'll listen politely to those who would advise us, but all the decisions are to be ours alone. Nobody is going to meddle with our personal independence in such matters. Besides, we think there is no one we can surely trust. We are certain that our intelligence, backed by willpower, can rightly control our inner lives and guarantee us success in the world in which we live. This brave philosophy, wherein each man plays God, sounds good in the speaking, but it still has to meet the acid test. How well does it actually work? One good look in the mirror ought to be the answer enough for any alcoholic. And that's true of me. I was bound by self-will to my outlook and attitudes and behaviour, and determining what I felt was right. And often it was right, but it didn't necessarily take account of the big picture and where I was headed, which was the gutter and a broken person, that me being me. Should his own image in the mirror be too awful to contemplate, and it usually is, he might first take a look at the results normal people are getting from self-sufficiency. Everywhere he sees people filled with anger and fear, society breaking up into warring fragments. Each fragment says to the others, "We are right and you are wrong." Every such pressure group, if it is strong enough, self-righteously imposes its will upon the rest. And everywhere the same thing is being done on an individual basis. The sum of all this mighty effort is less peace and less brotherhood than before. The philosophy of self-sufficiency is not paying off. Plainly enough, it is a bone-crushing juggernaut whose final achievement is ruin. So when it says here, and everywhere the same thing is being done on an individual basis, self-righteous impositions by others on the rest. The good news in AA is we don't proselytise, which just simply means we don't impose our views or opinions or beliefs on other people, in fellowship or outside it. It's all about learning what's working for people in their lives and adopting what seems appropriate in our lives, and trying not to judge it either way as wrong or not for us. Well, no, sometimes we do need to judge that it's not for us because it just doesn't fit with what we understand of life and how a higher power can work in our lives. So we trust to the process of listening, understanding, having the humility to keep on making mistakes over and over again and learning from them, and not the insanity of doing them over and over again and the same result. And bone-crushing juggernauts do exist in AA as much as anywhere else, which is why I always emphasise it's the wisdom of other people which keeps me on track, right-sized. At the same time, a lot of people gain so much self-confidence that they think they have the answer for everyone else, and indeed they don't. So we try to keep level, trusted servants and not leaders. Therefore, we who are alcoholics can consider ourselves fortunate indeed. Each of us has had his own near fatal encounter with the juggernaut of self-will, and has suffered enough under its weight to be willing to look for something better. So it is by circumstance rather than by any virtue that we have been driven to AA, have admitted defeat, have acquired the rudiments of faith, and now want to make a decision to turn our will and our lives over to a higher power, your higher power. We realise the word dependence is as distasteful to many psychiatrists and psychologists as it is to alcoholics, and the word dependence is actually interdependence, that we depend on each other. However, and this is still true today, a lot of psychology and psychiatric therapeutic processes are about putting the individual back in charge of their lives in a very unhelpful way, which is to be able to have the willpower or the understanding to control what is going on around them. And the true answer is we don't really have power over people, places and things. What we have is choices based on what we know and the wisdom we keep learning from others. And that works much better because that's dependence, interdependence, not codependence, where power is over others or over us. Like our professional friends, we too are aware that there are wrong forms of dependence. We have experienced many of them. No adult man or woman, for example, should be in too much emotional dependence upon a parent. They should have been weaned long ago, or long before, and if they have not been, they should wake up to the fact. This very form of faulty dependence has caused many a rebellious alcoholic to conclude that dependence of any sort must be intolerably damaging. But dependence upon an AA group or upon a higher power hasn't produced any baleful results. So in other words, the power of truth, love and wisdom, which is my higher power, or powers, embodied in the concept of God, as I can understand it for me, that you have to find your own understanding, which is absolutely appropriate. Probably ends up in the same place, but we might say it differently. When World War II broke out, this spiritual principle had its first major test. AAs entered the services and were scattered all over the world. Would they be able to take discipline, stand up under fire, and endure the monotony and misery of war? Would the kind of dependence they had learned in AA carry them through? Well, it did. And this is dependence on a higher power, wisdom from those around us. So if you're in World War II and someone says duck, we do duck because of the bullet coming our way, with our name on it, probably. Did it carry them through? Well, it did. They had even fewer alcoholic lapses or emotional binges than AA's Safe at Home did. They were just as capable of endurance and valour as any other soldiers. Whether in Alaska or on the Salerno beachhead, their dependence upon a higher power worked. Far from being a weakness, this dependence was their chief source of strength. The world of wisdom around us. I need to be able to listen. That's how it works for me. So how exactly can the willing person continue to turn his will and life over to the higher power? He made a beginning, we have seen, when he commenced to rely upon AA for the solution of his alcohol problem. By now, though, the chances are that he's become convinced that he has more problems than alcohol, and that some of these refuse to be solved by all the sheer personal determination and courage that he can muster. They simply will not budge. They make him desperately unhappy and threaten his newfound sobriety. Our friend is still victimised by remorse and guilt when he thinks of yesterday, and it is shame and guilt of not realising that we had an illness. An addiction is an illness. So shame and guilt go hand in hand with not being good enough, and overcoming this and suddenly listening to doctors, professionals, psychiatrists and a lot of people who have found sobriety, that shame and guilt about being ill doesn't help anyone, no matter what it is. Bitterness still overpowers him when he broods upon those he still envies or hates. His financial insecurity worries him sick, and panic takes over when he thinks of all the bridges to safety that alcohol burned behind him. And how shall he ever straighten out that awful jam that cost him the affection of his family and separated him from them? His lone courage and unaided will cannot do. Surely he must now depend upon somebody or something else. And that's true of life. If we knew all the answers, we wouldn't need to do anything more, would we? If we knew all the answers of life, we'd all be happy, wouldn't we? Well, I haven't found it so. And that's not a bad thing. It means that life is just about endeavour, simple endeavour, and it's difficult, as N. Scott Peck said in the book Road Less Travelled. Anyway, going on here. At first, that somebody is likely to be his closest AA friend. He relies upon the assurance that his many troubles, now made more acute because he cannot use alcohol to kill the pain, can be solved too. Of course, the sponsor points out that our friend's life is still unmanageable, even though he is sober, that after all, only a bare start on AA's program has been made. More sobriety brought about by the admission of alcoholism and by attendance at a few meetings is very good indeed, but it is bound to be a far cry from permanent sobriety and a contented, useful life. Truth, how to love, be loved and useful, and the wisdom we get from others. That is just where the remaining steps of the AA program come in. Nothing short of continuous action upon these as a way of life can bring the much desired result, which is continuous sobriety. But just for today. Then it is explained that the other steps of the AA program can be practiced with success only when step 3 is given a determined and persistent trial. In other words, letting go, letting God, or simply letting good and good conscience prevail. And that's the personal understanding which is most important, what works for you. Not what works for your best friend or works for a friend down the road. It's determining that we can let the wisdom of the world in, and the universe in, as it appears on a daily basis. And some of the wisdom is learned by doing the wrong things as much as the right things, and that's by learning. That's where the pain is, I guess. It's less painful when we realise it's okay to make mistakes, and this is just part of life experience, and it's helping me on my passage into sobriety and a life of soberness and happiness as it can be. Yes, this statement may surprise newcomers who have experienced nothing but constant deflation. Oh, sorry, I missed a bit. Then it is explained that the other steps of the AA program can be practiced with success only when step 3 is given a determined and persistent trial. This statement may surprise newcomers who have experienced nothing but constant deflation. and a growing conviction that human will is of no value whatever. They have become persuaded, and rightly so, that many problems besides alcohol will not yield to a headlong assault powered by the individual alone. But now it appears that there are certain things which only the individual can do, and this is about the steps, all by himself, and in the light of his own circumstances. He needs to develop the quality of willingness, and this is it, it's just being willing. When he acquires willingness, he is the only one who can make the decision to exert himself. Trying to do this is an act of his own will. All of the 12 steps require sustained and personal exertion to conform to their principles, and so we trust to God's will, or our higher power's will. So truth, love and wisdom, perfect for me, but it doesn't mean it's my understanding is going to suit you, or your understanding, and I'm glad if it doesn't, because I'm going to learn something from you in the future, hopefully. It is when we try to make our will conform with God's that we begin to use it rightly. God's will is looking after everybody, or the universe, nature and providence is about the good of life, working. Nature works that way. It is when we try to make our will conform with God's we begin to use it rightly. To all of us, this was a most wonderful revelation. Our whole trouble had been the misuse of willpower. We had tried to bombard our problems with it, instead of attempting to bring it into agreement with God's intention for us, as nature and providence suggest, to live to the good of life, rather than pouring gallons of alcohol inside us and wondering why life is not quite going as we might have wanted it to go. To make this increasingly possible is the purpose of AA's 12 steps, and step 3, with willingness, opens the door. Once we have come into agreement with these ideas, it is really easy to begin the practice of step 3, willingness. In all times of emotional disturbance or indecision, we can pause, ask for quiet, and in the stillness simply say, and this is why this serenity prayer is so important to me, and is said at the end of all my videos, so I won't add to it this time. We can simply say, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thy will, not mine, be done.